Salam alaikum. Welcome to Kunafa and Shay, a podcast produced for HowlRound Theatre Commons, a free and open platform for theatre makers worldwide. Kunafa and Shay discusses and analyzes contemporary and historical Middle Eastern and North African, or MENA, and Southwest Asian and North African, or SWANA, theatre from across the region.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Nabra.
And we're your hosts.
Our name, Kunafa and Shay, invites you into the discussion in the best way we know how, with complex and delicious sweets like kunafa and perfectly warm tea, or in Arabic, shay.
Kunafa and Shay is a place to share experiences, ideas, and sometimes to engage with our differences. In each country in the MENA or SWANA world, you'll find kunafa made differently. In that way, we also lean into the diversity, complexity, and robust flavors of MENA and SWANA theater. We bring our own perspectives, research, and special guests in order to start a dialogue and encourage further learning and discussion.
Welcome to the 5th season of Kunafa and Shay, where we delve into the dynamic world of performance art across the region. We're highlighting the creative, innovative, and artistic disruption of performance artists, exploring how their art serves as a powerful medium for expression and social change. This season features interviews with performance artists who challenge norms and use their craft to further conversations about topics like identity, diaspora, homeland, and futurity. Today, we're talking about narrative podcasts with Laila Abdo and her new upcoming podcast, The Great Pyramid Scheme, which drops February 3rd, 2025. Hailing from Southern Illinois, Laila Abdo lived in Los Angeles for 5 years before moving to Stars Hollow Land, aka the American Northeast. Laila came to screenwriting because she wants to see more than the hijabi wife or terrorist mother. Instead, she loves creating self-actualizing, struggling, optimistic millennial women. As a multi-hyphenate writer-actor, she has produced sketches and pilot presentations. A UCB grad, Laila believes in utilizing comedy to lift up marginalized communities. Her current writing dives into the joy of being an Arab American woman. With a mother from Lebanon and a father from Syria, Laila wants brown girls front and center, women exploring possibilities, and children of immigrants to know their American experience is valid. Her short-term goal is to get her work out there. The dream is to continue creating content she believes in that illuminates the Arab American experience. That is a beautiful mission. It's so lovely to have you here, Laila.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Whenever Nabra said that she was doing a podcast with someone else, I was like, well, I must meet this person sometime. So I'm very excited to have you here with us.
You know, my kind of favorite thing is that I would see Nabra sharing your podcast, Kunafa and Shay. And so I knew Nabra and Marina in a very virtual way of like, oh, great. There's like Middle Eastern, MENA, SWANA, whichever term you want to use. There's that kind of theater community talk happening. This is awesome. Yeah. And then Nabra submitted that she was interested in being one of the writers on the show. And I just said, this person honestly is interested in working with me. Massive score, like massive. And I was so excited. And we hit it off and we had our kind of making sure we can work together interview. Creative interviews are weird because you're basically like, can I enjoy time with you? And is this going to be like a fun vibe space?
We're just dating. It was just a first date.
It was a first
Virtually.
date. Yeah. Virtual first date. And then, you know, we've been together for months.
And it's been going great.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. Yeah, the amount of parallels and things that we have in common, I think, really show in the writing that we really vibed and we had a lot of fun.
This is such a different project, obviously, to Kunafa and Shay. Kunafa and Shay is obviously nonfiction. It's a lot of interviews. It's relatively academic. And Great Pyramid Scheme is a narrative podcast. It's very funny. It's very lighthearted. But it's also got a lot of that like research component, which we'll get to. And I'm excited to talk about it and dive in. But first, I want to know more about you because you're a multi-hyphenate creator. You've done writing, acting, producing in film and sketch comedy, and now in podcasts. So it's seems like the thread for you is comedy. Why are you drawn to comedy in your creation and art, especially when it comes to illuminating the Arab American experience?
I'm pretty passionate about comedy because I am really overwhelmed by what the images are of an Arab or anyone in the Arab world. And this does extend to anybody who's also Muslim as well. We have somehow been put in this massive umbrella for being a very diverse, very different, very specific communities. And this blanket keeps happening whenever we keep being tragedy porn. It's just this very, very comfortable blanket for people in the West for some reason. And I find it very suffocating. And I think there are so many amazing dramatists that I really respect and admire. But it kind of became really clear to me that I just needed to see somebody who's like my uncles and aunts who's just making stupid jokes. I just really needed to see more of us not being mired in extreme tragedy. I'm kind of in this interesting place where I have a massive amount of privilege and economic protection. And so the disconnect between what people think an Arab American experience is versus the reality versus how this translates to the aggression that we see today in Middle Eastern communities. I think that can only be combated through comedy, because the problem is that we keep being othered and we keep being seen in extreme lights that we're not in control of. But I can control a dick joke, so here we are.
No, amazing. And like, what a great line to draw us into talking about the Great Pyramid Scheme. Can you tell us about the Great Pyramid Scheme, generally, like any teaser that you can give? But then I also want to dig more into representation and how you're thinking about representation in regards to that project.
Yeah. With the Great Pyramid Scheme, I saw on Reddit this comment that just said, "What if there was a workplace comedy about building the pyramids? LOL." It was very Reddity. And it just kind of stuck in my brain and went in my ideas book until I told my friend who's in my writing group, and he said, that's the one you need to do next. So I kind of followed a lot of curiosity with it. The story is, in ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Khufu is building the greatest pyramid of all time. But amid feuding queens and union strikes, will he ever finish? Crapopolis meets Futurama in this narrative comedy podcast that is absolutely not safe for work. And if you look up not safe for work podcasts, those are normally erotica podcasts. I'm not saying we don't make sex jokes, but this is just definitely what you would normally be watching on Adult Swim. We've made into an audio play series. And what was kind of fun about this was the team that we had together. We had a team of 5 writers, including myself and Nabra. And we followed what was fun about something or what was interesting about something while also trying to get a lot of historic inspiration. So I was initially inspired with a character design that Pharaoh Khufu's dad, who's Pharaoh Daddy in the series, but in real life, he's Pharaoh Sneferu. The ancient Greeks, wax poetically about what a great dude, super amazing, Pharaoh Sneferu, 2 thumbs up. Then it comes to be Pharaoh Khufu's time, and Pharaoh Khufu is the one in the Great Pyramid of Giza, and for some reason, none of us know his name, even though I have multiple social studies textbooks that had the Great Pyramid of Giza on it, and we never actually talked about anything Egyptian. It's a little bit of a sidebar. But we didn't know his name, and then come to find out the ancient Greeks, including Herodotus, who is the father of history, he's termed the father of history, he wrote the craziest lies, and they have to be lies at some point, that he's pimping out his daughter to the slaves, otherwise nobody would work on this pyramid. He's doing all of this. Pharaoh Khufu, boo. Very intense, like saying you're pimping out your daughter or selling other people in order to build this pyramid. When the government of Egypt has recently been going on this kind of campaign to say, we have the archaeological proof pyramids were not built with slaves. It was not slave labor. We have the remains. All these funerary remains show that they were buried with respect and with this kind of dignity that showed that they had to be of a certain economic class, so a worker class instead of slave class. There was a lot of evidence that supported this was kind of an FDR-like project. FDR with the New Deal of having all of these things that we still enjoy in America today of, the national parks, murals everywhere, the way that we were investing in the environment and arts and other kind of things while people didn't have jobs. We can make a job that's something for the value of society. So how this relates to Egypt was the pyramid was built because there was always flooding season. What does an agricultural society, that's also a trade society, but Egypt is still the Middle East breadbasket. What do you do when the agricultural society can't do anything because the Nile has flooded? And that's what they would do. Here, you can still work. Make a block.
It's amazing how much of this, the history and conversations about representation came up throughout the writing process and still in what we do, because you'll listen to it and it's just, the product is like a very silly, hilarious podcast with a lot of inappropriate jokes, but this was constantly on our minds, all of us as a writing team. We were always going back to the source material, the history, looking up gods and rituals and real traditional practices. And because we had a lot of MENA folks on the writing team, we were always thinking about representation and how we can balance having this ridiculous comedy that we are having so much fun writing, and all of us have this sense of humor, and also, do well by our identities. It's such an interesting and bizarre, I guess, balance, especially when it comes to this project.
Yeah, I kind of hope that people will take that as getting a bit more interested if they heard something, since we were really following the fun of what came up. I think I can say all 5 of us super dig mythology. So all 5 of us really had fun of being like, okay, what god can we put in this episode? So we had this kind of point of magic and mythology that we were really leaning on that was super fun because gods are awesome. Then we had this second point where this is really a labor show. This is really about supporting unions, supporting workers' rights, and kind of doing that in a funny way. The big major conflict of the show is Pharaoh Khufu's trying to build this pyramid, and then the kind of secondary protagonist, Aaron, is leading a labor movement that somehow winds up like including crocodiles to be protected under workers' rights. And the crocodile should have beer in payment as well. Stella, the beer of Egypt. Yeah, so we had all these different kind of bits that was really fun. And then we had all these anachronisms at the same time. So hopefully it's just one of those things that's a spark for people to get more interested in accurate depictions instead of what I am tired of, which is always the Western lens first. I know I grew up in America, but the Western lens first in all of these things has been very, very challenging, particularly in current media. It's been very challenging.
Well, and I think sometimes people take comedy as being a media that you could just play with, and that things like representation don't play into it as well, which is of course not true. Like you want the representation to be true and good, and it makes the comedy deeper and richer when those things happen, when the care is actually being given.
Yeah, I fully agree with that because in my time in LA, I was getting deeper and deeper in different comedy communities, including, Upright Citizens Brigade, that improv community, or even just there are a lot of great Arab stand-ups. Laura Laham and Lynn Maleh, who have actually voice acted on the show, have been both hosts of different Arab American comedy shows all across the U.S. Very proud of them. They're hilarious. You should go watch them. Go to a show. You will not regret it. Yeah. And the specificity of something, it doesn't have to be your culture to still be super, super intriguing. But because of the way joke writing works, I felt like my level of comedy got more specific because Laura and I actually were in a kind of virtual comedy writers group where everybody else was working on their stand-ups and getting really specific with jokes. And I would bring in pages and be like, what do you guys think? Which was very nice of them to let me tag along as a non-stand-up. And when you see the actual detail and the microscope that goes into every single joke of saying, where is this joke hitting? Who's the joke on? Would it be better if we try to switch out this? It's like watching a chef or something be like, no, I need a little bit more of this garlic. I need well, everyone always needs loads of garlic. That's a false equivalent, but I need a little bit more of this. I want an essence of that. And being aware that who it's going out to totally changes the comedy as well. So I think comedy is also the best and been the most exciting for a lot of marginalized communities. I felt very lucky to be part of that space and to continue to be part of it. People are saying really exciting things right now and doing a lot of exciting things.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the doom scrolling is broken up for me by a Middle Eastern artist coming across my newsfeed and saying something that hits really close to home, but that is dealing with sort of the heartbreak and trauma of the current times in a way that is witty and smart and funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but I think we all celebrated. Emil Wakim is on SNL now, and he gets to be Christian Lebanese on SNL. That's not a fight that has been nothing. But I'm very much interested in the reason I've been producing more, which has been a gift, as I've really felt this call of we don't have enough out there. We don't have enough that's even offered as a counterpoint to the barrage of other images, the barrage of other statements. I mean, yeah, if there was a time in my lifetime where the word terrorist got untangled from the Arab identity, I would feel so blessed. I would feel so grateful. And that's what we're fighting. I mean, that's what we're going up against. That this is an insane first picture. It is a crazy first image that is held very deeply by people. And I find it very irresponsible that this image is being propagated. I don't really blame ordinary people when they're getting thrown this image all the time. What are they going to do differently? That's our job. Different image.
Definitely. And the Great Pyramid Scheme will give that different image, which is really exciting.
I hope so.
I mean, I have faith based on everything I've heard. But you brought up voice actors, and now I'm very curious because so narrative podcasts are new to me. Once I'm curious how many episodes. Would love to hear if you don't mind sharing about how you structure them, but I also am curious now about voice actors because I'm like, do I know these voice actors? How did you cast? More great representation happening here.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool also joy of getting to produce yourself. We were working with a small budget and immense talent, and I am very grateful for everybody for doing so. As Nabra would attest, because also Nabra signed up for so many episodes to write on, we had a breakneck pace. In February, we spent 2 weeks kind of talking out what's the story, what's the character design. So that was 1 week. And then the following week, we already said, okay, these plot lines are going to go together. These plot lines are going to go together. And these plot lines are going to go together. So sign up what's interesting to you. And everybody wanted Aliens. So I bowed out of that. Nabra is actually one of the writers on Aliens. Aliens is very funny. Please make it to Aliens. It keeps getting more ridiculous. Stick with the show, guys. Yeah. So we wrote over from March to May, we wrote 300 pages. So that was each kind of arc is kind of a part 1 and part 2. We get to a climax of Aliens Week, and then we come back to have the kind of big finale and finish of it. Then that following week we do Atlantis, and then we come back and we finish it. And the following week we do what's actually turned out to be everybody who worked on the shows, what they think is the craziest episode, which was the Duat, Afterlife, and Periods episode, which Nabra and I also wrote on with Robert.
which will probably be the feature of this pod swap. So if you're going over to Great Pyramid Scheme, you may see Marina and I talking about pyramids and the afterlife.
Yes, that's become our dramaturgical baby of equal representation for women, I guess. I'm not sure. We could probably spin this very nicely, but we found very funny research regarding periods, so we followed the fun of that. And and then we've kind of finished with the finale of the plagues. But we had what will come out is the week 1, which will introduce us to the world of the characters, as well as a bonus full storyline of propaganda, which has been very fun, of just kind of talking about propaganda in a kind of light and silly way. So that'll be the whole first weeks, and then we'll have 4 weeks following that. So it's going to be quite a few episodes, 25-minute length, and that's just mostly because I don't know how to write short form very well, and we really treated it very much like a sitcom as much as we could, even though they were 60 pages. So for people who may not be writers or screenwriters, you normally call a page a minute. So we try to kind of do that, and we'll see how far over we are when we're out of post-production. But really treating it as, okay, we have a plot A and a plot B and a plot C, and we have all these very layered, in-depth things going on. We have all these different characters, very ensemble-y, because that's also the comedy I drift towards loving. And everyone had a favorite to write for, or a favorite, yeah, that's the one I want, became very clear very fast. You know, Nabra loves writing for Queen Hanutson, who's the Poison Queen.
And who I will always take the opportunity to say, many people or many historians believe is Nubian. So y'all gotta recognize there's some representation, y'all.
We kept it accurate. Yeah, it was very cool because in the writer's room, Nebra's Nubian, I'm Lebanese and Syrian, and then we have another writer who identifies as biracial, Palestinian and American, I guess. I don't know how you say white in another way from this. He's Palestinian. And and so we have 60% from our writers group. And then our voice actors, we had all the writers actually wound up doing some voice acting bit roles at some point. But likewise, 60% of our writers' room, including myself, are also actors. And so I knew that, hey, I've got a wealth of people I've worked with before and a wealth of talent here, where Robert and Bree did so many of the additional voices, as well as Robert's wife, Morgan, was an amazing voice help. So for our additional voices, we just tapped on the people we know. And I held a casting session for following the other people. I don't know if you guys have talked about Ululi on this podcast before, but that's actually how I saw your podcast being distributed before, was Nabra posting on Ululi, I have Kunafa and Shay. And so I definitely was or Marina, do you also post for the show in there?
No.
I think it's mostly me. And for those who don't know, it's Ululi Arabs in the Arts Facebook group, because we still holding down the fort on Facebook. But it's such a good community, honestly, of many different types of artists across the nation. I don't know if it's even international. Posting about art, activism, and like just pumping each other up and creating like really real community on Facebook, which doesn't really exist that much anymore.
It's been great. And there are several people in the group that are just been completely lovely throughout. Ali Nasser, who is the voice of our Pharaoh Khufu, as well as the voice of Yahweh, as his notable, I guess, secondary role. Ali was somebody I had gotten to know through some activism in the group, and I knew I'd wanted to work with him. I just knew I wanted to work with Ali some point. Work with Ali at some point, and so we did. And that was awesome that he was available. He did the table read for us, and he made time in his schedule to do the full season, which was great. the voice actor for Aaron, as well as Anubis and a few other random roles here and there, actually knows Nebra.
Yeah, who I know from Seattle. He was in Selling Kabul over there and is an Egyptian actor, Adam Sharawi, who, I'm always trying to get more Egyptians into all the spaces.
But I fully believe you should definitely hire both Ali and Adam, both Egyptian, both fantastic actors outside of that. They've got amazing range, amazing voice talent. And then Lynn Maleh and Laura Lahem, I actually called up and saying, we really need some Middle Eastern women. And they got kind of spooked because I had a very intense casting call saying, please do not submit if you cannot commit to the dates. Please do not submit if you cannot record at home. And Lynn said, oh, I don't have an at home. I was like, that's okay. We will make it work. And she is so funny. She is such a great Queen Merititis. She is such a joy to work with. She has such a great sense of timing and beats. Laura, the same thing of she just has the Queen Hanutson arrogance and the very much tackling it in a great way. So I was very grateful to these excellent, funny women for joining the team. Last but not least of our voice actors, that's kind of separate from the writing community that we hired, was Adrian Duell, who is an Iranian American. And Adrian and I had worked on a project a few years ago, but he is also a stand-up comedian. So we are basically theater people and stand-ups did this show. Ali and Adam also have a significant theater background. Bree, Robert, and I have a massive theater background. Nabra, obviously, theater background. So we wanted to have that kind of live theater feel instead of, we kind of want to honor the performance of being able to do things together. So instead of recording separately, we did use Zencastr to record virtually all from at home and mostly be able to feed off each other's energy in that way.
And so another thing we want to talk about with this podcast, more, I guess, generally zooming out into the realm of narrative podcasts, is, how it might fit into this huge umbrella of performance art, since this is our performance art season, which really we're using to be like anything, because we're learning more and more that performance art has been, it started in kind of galleries and as a complement to visual art, but now it really encompasses so many different forms and multimedia expressions and just different ways of presenting performance. Do you have thoughts on how narrative podcasts, as they're especially gaining popularity, fit into this umbrella of performance art, and also any other projects you may have considered performance art in your career? I'm thinking about stand-up or sketch comedy as well.
Yeah, I think that it's so awesome that you guys are spending a whole season really dedicated to performance. Almost everybody's first connection who is a professional today does come from doing either a school show or whatever, something that was done live in front of everyone. But that's not fully the case anymore, that it was always live. Some people's first connection now is by doing TikTok. Sometimes it's being able to control that many different factors. What I love about this narrative podcast is we took a lot of the joy of live, a lot of the fun theatricality of my forced theater boot camp of we're all doing this together, saddle up. And we took that kind of fun and play as we're also using digital techniques. Like, this is going to be distributed digitally. You're going to be able to find this on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Castbox, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You should be able to find it. And if not, please stalk our page on Instagram, The Great Pyramid Scheme. You will find us, please. And it's been very kind of a different experience to understand a digital audience goer, because almost everybody listens to their podcasts in the car, doing chores, on a walk, while doing something. Whereas if you think about the history of radio, The radio was in the living room. You turned it on. You sat at the fireplace. So there's something kind of fun about the motion and the enjoyment of different people are ready to approach something at a different time in their day. So I always think digital's an exciting space, and I've really enjoyed it. I came from a musical theater background. As a kid, I did a ton of musical theater, and I also have done a lot of classic Western classical music. That's what my focus was as an undergrad. Whenever I left college, I actually was in Chicago at Storefront Theaters for a while, which was an awesome experience. If you are a theater person, you should go to Chicago, live in Chicago, be in Chicago. What an amazing community. I cannot give the Chicago theater community enough love or enough of a shout out of the quality of what's happening in Chicago. It's extraordinary. Had an extraordinary experience there. So when I moved to LA, it was learning all over again. The rules for film and television are completely separate of what live performance rules are. I don't know, I'm a Lebanese woman, so I guess my face is rather overactive. I'm using my hands quite a bit right now. You won't be able to hear my hands, but I can hear my hands. And the difference between that with finding kind of stillness and how that's going to work on screen, how are you repeating to have a close enough take for your editor, but differentiating to have an interesting take for your editor was a completely awesome skill set by filming that I really enjoyed. And while they're doing improv, I think is probably some of the most fun performance art there is, that it can be long form, short form. There's just no boundaries in comedy. There's no boundaries in stand-up. Because stand-up also is a very specific feedback loop that they will just kick you out, which is great. I fully believe in that kind of instant feedback loop in some ways. Which is great. So I think that some of my favorite performance art experiences have also been very much in community, very much in ensemble, or like when I was in college, I went to Southern Illinois University, and we had a partnership with the Gaiety School of Acting in Ireland, mostly just because my concert choir director, Dr. Stevenson Davenport, amazing person, had a connection there. And we did what we called an original musical project, because Patrick Sutton, the director of Gaiety School of Acting, just does not dig musical theater in the American form. So he wanted to be very clear, this is not a musical, it's a play with music, which after you spend enough time with theater people, that becomes very clear. Is it a musical? Is it a play with music? What's the medium we're going with? And we did a devised thing where we did a lot of different exercises, and from that, the story was lifted up as Martin McGuire, our writer, kind of observed and put things together for us. It was very organic. It was very nice, like structured, devised work, which was really fun. And then we composed stuff, there was one time where one of our comp students composed something and one of our trombonists composed something, and they were like, we should layer this. And they layered it, and we kept that in the show. There was one time they were trying to ask us to do an exercise everybody can do. I said, okay, everybody lift up your shoe and tap it on the floor and then pass it on. And our writer was like, it's a shoe factory. That's our location. And I mean, it was just a very exciting, very loose ends connotation, pulling things together. So I think performance art can have two sides. It's just this kind of place to be open and exploring, or it can be what the Great Pyramid Scheme has done with our scripts and our specificity and our acting as close to a TV show as we can without major funding. What we're telling in the Great Pyramid Scheme are very specific stories with a very specific goal in mind. The pilot just introduces you to the world, but the next episode about propaganda, propaganda's everywhere. And being able to kind of understand that and recognize that, I think is really important, but while also kind of silly. Isn't it ridiculous that we have crazy amounts of swag for just a local business, the pen, the squeeze stress ball. What other things did we throw in there, Nabra? Do you remember? Like, we threw in so many crazy things.
I think there were just things that were shaped like a pyramid,
Yes.
like a pyramid, but with like the logo on it. Yeah.
Right. Like, you can even see that on like Foodstagram of like burning a logo onto a crepe or something, It's like, so this kind of extreme capitalism, this extreme marketing has been kind of a lot. Then with, like, is there a moral to the story with aliens, or just, maybe there's not. Aliens might not have a moral.
It's up to the audience to find the moral.
Yeah. And then with Atlantis, I feel like that was very much more like a marital story while also having a union rights plot B. But it was just kind of very marital in nature of that relationship. And the period Duat episode, moral of the story is give women healthcare. Like, this is really crazy. Like, isn't it absolutely nuts? The moral of the story is, how is it that, half the population, sometimes more in different places, has no access to feminine care products? And you just kind of expect society to keep turning without honoring this very normal biological thing. I find very surprising. And then we kind of wrap it up with the joy of plagues. But I think Nabra wanted to speak on the period.
Well, I wanted to kind of highlight a lot of what you've shared in that, a lot of, I think, the thread of we just keep coming back to with performance art, performance theater, and we often have film on this podcast as well, just randomly because we really like film, is that the story and the kind of goals in mind, the mission to make change or to represent or to say something important is this common thread throughout whatever type of art, narrative art that we're finding. And this is why we just keep kind of expanding our definition of performance. And that's clear in everything that you're saying about Great Pyramid Scheme. And also, what's interesting, something that you highlighted that I just wanted to go back to, is also the nature of the audience, this nature of this like mobile audience that's really kind of inherently probably doing something else, is a bizarre kind of space to think about when it comes to digital art that's very different from obviously what we expect in the theater, but can be true of other forms of art that's distributed outside of kind of dedicated art spaces. And that kind of brings it into a completely different realm of how you interact with the audience through that performance. And I know you earlier, before we started recording, you were talking about how you've been thinking a lot about protest art recently and how that really is living in the digital space largely. And I'm even thinking about how it, in all of our little ways, or big ways as well, a project like Great Pyramid Scheme, which doesn't sound or feel like conventional performance protest art, has elements of that through that mission. Just wondering what you've been thinking about when it comes to protest art in the digital space, and how that kind of relates to the art that you create as an Arab American creator.
Yeah, that's a great question. You also made me sound very like intelligent with my other points, so thank you. Shukran habibti. Anyway, I think protest art was something that was always the most exciting to me to learn about in school. I had a really great modern history class in high school with Mr. Henshaw. Shout out to Mr. Henshaw.
You were amazing at remembering names, by the way. I just want to point that out. I could never remember a single name.
So we had a whole time talking about the 1960s and protest art and how that was not just in one place. And America in the 1960s, protest art was everywhere. It was physical. It was by presence, by doing sit-ins, by using your body. It was in dance. It was in music. It was in books, Silent Spring, all of these kind of things that we are still kind of suffering the consequences and still deeply passionate about. finding solutions to these prevailing things when it comes to how do we treat others? How do we care for each other? How do we care for the planet? How are we caring for environment? How are we caring with different things, whether that's healthcare, housing, food insecurity? It's a very long list of issues I'm very passionate about, and also suffering extreme existential dread from literally daily. Like many of us watching Palestine every day. And now it's in Lebanon, and now we're all just waiting and hoping for some peace and sensibility that's diplomacy instead of ecocide, scholasticide, and genocide. It's been very tough. So I think with this protest art, like I said, for me, I think it's amazing that there are places like Watermelon Productions that are lifting up that Israelism documentary. I think that's been a very life-changing thing for people to kind of start seeing the way Zionism is in America and in the West, and kind of even just wonder why. Even getting people to the point of wondering why a protest has been successful. You don't even have to make somebody agree with you. You just need somebody to wonder or mark it. And that protest has now been successful. So I remember seeing somebody post on Instagram, like, if you're an Arab creator, just do it. Just get it out there. So this is a form of protest in the sense that it is a comedy. It is not keeping us in a tragedy porn space. And it is remembering that there are other great civilizations before Greece. America has this very odd way of saying everything started in Greece. It just kind of blew my mind as somebody who studied music at a bachelor's level and in that depth. Nothing started before Greece? Are you kidding me? Like, I have never had a music lesson for the amount of hours I've spent in music. I've never had a music lesson where I had the access to learn how to sing in Arabic, the access to even hear anything bil Arabi. Like, that's mind-blowing. And it's not even just our civilization. I definitely encourage other marginalized communities and other people who are indigenous in different areas to definitely feel that call of nobody is stepping out of their way to help us do this. But when you get enough proof of concepts, hopefully it'll happen. That's really what we're going on. I think protest art is vital.
Definitely. Well, and I love how you also sort of parsed out protest, because I think we're seeing protest in a bunch of different ways right now. But I think even learning to sing in Arabic is a protest whenever a Western system has shown, like, this is the way to sing in English. This is the way that you sing all of these songs. Or actually, I mean, I studied classical music too, and I sang in French and German and Italian, but not Arabic. I didn't know anything about Arabic scales, maqaim, like, I didn't understand music outside of the West. And so I think you really bringing up also just learning this different thing, putting it out there, giving it to the world, is a protest too, and a really important piece of the puzzle that we need right now.
And I want to be really clear with Great Pyramid is that obviously my heart and my focus and my mind has only felt like it's only been in Palestine just for a while. But that doesn't mean that I do not honor, and I it was so important to me that Aaron is Jewish, and it is meant so that we can also do some fun things with it, anachronisms of Aaron being biblical Aaron or Abrahamic Aaron, however you want to phrase it. But so many of the greatest allies and the people speaking up have been Jewish folks who are very passionate about the value of life being the kind of sacred through line. And there are so many people of course, there is a very proud and strong through line of Jewish union workers and Jewish political factors that are in this sense of care instead of in what we're seeing the worst of in society, and not with a marker, but we are seeing the worst of society with both American and Israeli government leaders right now.
Absolutely. It's so, again, interesting to think about comedy and a project like this in its greater sociopolitical atmosphere. It goes back to a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is about how Arabs and MENA folks and SWANA folks are just so inherently politicized that even our joy, even our laughter is political. We can't get away from it. And thankfully, a lot of folks are, leaning into that, are thinking about that when it comes to crafting their art. But in a way, we can't help but think about that. That can't help but be a part of every aspect of every choice in our art making when we're talking about our own communities. And even when we're not, to be honest, because that itself is a politicized choice. So
I still have arguments with my husband. He brought this up in the car this week. I don't know why. I have not changed. But he really wants to get me to admit that the Denis Villeneuve version of Dune that's happened in 2020 and 2022 is a great film. And I will die on the hill that was there were so many choices that were made in the making of this Dune. I read the book. I watched the previous film before all of this came out. I did a lot of research to prove to myself that my instinct and my gut reaction to why is this happening in this way was so deep and so strong. God bless Javier Bardem. He is pro-Palestine. But all the same, why is Javier Bardem a fake Arab on screen among many other fake Arabs? They had a Jordanian film team where they didn't work with Jordan when they were filming. Denis Villeneuve has recorded in Jordan multiple times, also for the Blade Runner, whatever Ryan Gosling won. And I think there was another film he had done that was also filmed in Jordan. And he does not encourage any Jordanian filmmakers to rise to the production level. They're just organizing schedules like assistants. So please explain to me what Frank Herbert, the author, intended to literally be, fake Arabia in space, and we keep pretending it's not fake Arabia in space, and the kind of unspecific, the kind of sucking the oxygen out of that just drives me nuts of if this is what we're talking about, it is significant the way this was made and why this was made and why was it made that way. End of rant.
And end of episode. That was excellent. I love that.
We end on hot Shay.
My hot take.
Super hot Shay. So thank you for being on this podcast, Laila. Thank you for making the podcast. Hopefully also people are inspired to that the narrative podcast genre and medium is a really accessible way to get yourself out there and to get representation out there and to produce pretty easily with folks and on a pretty low budget. So that's like an important part, I think, of figuring out mediums where we can actually create art given our the resources that are available to us and given to us and often really withheld from us for often also political reasons that we've talked about in other episodes as well. So thank you for illuminating all of that, and thank you for your hot takes and hot Shay on Dune. To be honest,
hot Shay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. This has been awesome. Thank you.
This podcast is produced as a contribution to HowlRound Theatre Commons. You can find more episodes of Kunafa and Shay and other HowlRound podcasts by searching HowlRound wherever you find podcasts. If you loved this podcast, please post a rating and write a review on your platform of choice. This helps other people find us. You can also find a transcript for this episode, along with a lot of other progressive and disruptive content on the HowlRound.com website. Have an idea for an exciting podcast, essay, or TV event the theater community needs to hear? Visit HowlRound.com and contribute your ideas to the Commons.
Yalla, bye.